name is Aisyah Dinda Ada, and I'm here to be a master of ceremony for today's event. Ladies and gentlemen, are happy? Welcome to this very great agenda. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this international seminar with the theme Bridging Kriminology and Viktimologi toward Inclusive Justice System. It is my honor to acknowledge the presence of our respected rector, Ibu Dr. Sri Suciati Hukum, our respected Vice Rector 1, Ibu Dr. Munairo Munawar SPI MPD, our respected Vice Rector 2, Ibu Prof. Dr. Endah Rita Sulistiadewi, SSI MSI, our respected Vice Rector 4, Bapak Prof. Dr. Nur Khairi SPD MT MPD, our respected Dean of Faculty of Law, Bapak Dr. Wahyu Widodo SHM, our respected lecturer from Faculty of Law, our amazing speakers one, Mr. Dr. Banu Praskanuna from RI University, India. Our amazing speaker two, Ms. Karina Sharin from Iskandar University, Turkey. Our amazing speaker three, Ms. Prof. Edvandas Juknevius from the Darts University in Poland. And the last, the dearest audience. Before we process, let us take a moment to pray for the successes of our seminar event. Ladies and gentlemen, let us observe the moment of prayer according to each of our own belief. Prayer of delivered, thank you. And the next we're going to sing our national anthem and march UPGRIS. Please, all of the audience can stand up.
Tanah tumpah darah
And the next, we're gonna hear some speech of the head of this agenda, to Ms. Nadia Latifah Esra LLM. The floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning everyone. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Salam Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. The Excellency Rektor of Universitas Persatuan Guru Republik Indonesia Semarang, Dr. Sri Suciati M.Hum, Honorable Vice Rector 1, Dr. Munirah Munawar, Vice Rector 2, Profesor Indah Rita, Vice Rector 3, Dr. Sabto Budoyo SHMH, Vice Rector 4, Profesor Nurhoiri, and our respected the Dean of Faculty of Law, Dr. Wahyu Widodo SHMH, and respectable our invited speaker, Dr. Banu Prakashnona from RV University, India, Professor Edward from Gdańsk University, Poland, Ms. Karina Sirim from Üsküdar University, Turkey, and respectable to all the audiences, ladies and gentlemen, are happy. Dear audiences, all praises to God so that we can gather in this very great agenda that hosted by our lovely Faculty of Law, Universitas Persatuan Guru Republik Indonesia Semarang, with the theme Bridging Kriminologi and Viktimologi toward Inclusive Justice System. Is participated by approximately 1,000 participants through Zoom meeting as well as YouTube live channel or our own faculty. Those participants consist of the academician, the practitioner nationally as well as internationally, such as Australia, Africa, Paris, Germany, Mali, Turkey, and other countries that I can mention one by one. The enthusiasm of the participant due to the invited speaker that we have today from around the world, that we have a big hope to have academic collaboration in the next event. So dear audiences, this event can be running very well with the support of all the elements. So hats off to all the committee for hosting this very great agenda. On behalf of this head of this event, I do thanks for love, sincerity, sacrifice, and dedication. For all the audiences, enjoy our international seminar. Thank you very much for your nice attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nadia, for amazing speech today. Next speech, please welcome our respected Dean of Faculty of Law, to Bapak Dr. Wahyu Widodo SMH. The time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning everyone. Salam sehat, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Salam Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan, rahayu, rahayu, rahayu. Your Excellency, Mr. Dr. Banu Prakas, Mendatangkan Universitas India, Profesor Bahas, Universitas from University Poland, and Ms. Karina Sirim from University Turkey. The Honorable Rector University PGRI, Ms. Dr. Suciati M.Hum, the Honorable our Vice Rector University PGRI, Mr. Dr. Sabto Budoyo, Miss Profesor, Mr. Profesor Dr. Bagi, Miss Dr. Muniro, Miss Profesor Dr. Rita. The room is able to all the lecture of Fakulty of Universitas PGRI Semarang. The respectable to all the great officials that has been hosted this very great agenda. The respectable to all audiences, ladies and gentlemen, are happy that audience. It is great pleasure for me to welcome you all out of the University PGRI Semarang in our with agenda by our of the Universitas PGRI Semarang. Terus Internasional seminar on law and judgment, wadah, Viktimologi and Viktimologi, toward inclusive justice system. It would global and national protect the concept of an inclusive justice system has needed increasing attention, particularly why the development of principle so has restorative justice, victim, protection and community-based approaches. However, their implementation still has various challenges. Including limited regulatory framework, with institutional coordination and Egyptian awareness among law enforcement officers rejecting it right. Their audiences. This international seminar is not the end, but the gate or the opening for ongoing research, collaboration, with this outstanding speakers who are expert in the acoustic expertise in justice and the rule of law. As the field of law of the Universitas Semarang, I do appreciate this very great agenda. Thank you for all attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much for Pak Wahyu for amazing speech today. And the dearest audience, the next session we will hear the speech from our rector of Universitas PGRI Semarang for giving a welcoming speech and also opening remarks. To Ibu Dr. Sri Suciati, the time is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and warm greetings to all of us. Distinguished guests, Ibu Dr. Muniro Munawar SPI MPD, Vice Rector 1, Profesor Dr. Endah Rita Sulistya Dewi SSI MSI, Vice Rector 2, Dr. Sabto Budoyo, Vice Rector 3, and Profesor Nur Pairi, Vice Rector 4. Dr. Wahyu Widodo SH MHM, Dean of the Faculty of Law, Universitas PGRI Semarang, and Ms. Nadia Latifah SH LLM as the head of law. Our esteemed speakers, Dr. Banu Prakash Nuna from RV University, India, Ms. Karina Shrim from Üsküdar University, Turkey, Professor Ed Vardas from Gdańsk University, Poland. Welcome to Universitas PGRI Semarang. Honorable lecturers, students, and all participants. First of all, let us express our gratitude to the Almighty God for His blessings that allow us to gather here today in good health to attend this international seminar organized by the Faculty of Law, Universitas PGRI Semarang. I would like to convey my highest appreciation to the Faculty of Law for organizing this meaningful academic event. This seminar reflects our strong commitment to advancing knowledge and strengthening international academic collaboration. The theme of today's seminar, Bridging Kriminologi and Viktimologi towards Inclusive Justice System, is highly relevant to the current global challenges. Today, justice systems are not only expected to enforce the law, but also to ensure protection, recovery, and fairness for victims. Through these academic forums, I sincerely hope that valuable insights, innovative ideas, and constructive discussions will emerge, contributing to the development of a more inclusive and human justice system. The presence of distinguished speakers from various countries provides a valuable opportunity for all of us to broaden our perspectives and to build stronger international partnerships. To all participants, I encourage you to actively engage in discussions, exchange ideas, and make the most of this opportunity to expand your academic networks. Finally, by saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I hereby officially declare the International Seminar of the Faculty of Law, Universitas PGRI Semarang, with the theme Bridging Kriminologi and Viktimologi towards Inclusive Justice Systems open. May the seminar run smoothly and bring meaningful benefit to us all. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Ibu Rektor, for an amazing speech today. And next, we're going to give some token of appreciation from our Rector and the Dean of Faculty of Law to Mr. Banu from RV University. To Ibu Rektor, the Dean of Faculty of Law, and Mr. Banu, please come forward to giving and take a picture together. And all of the vice rector and all lecturer, please also come forward to take a picture together. stand up and take a picture together for a while. Thank you so much everyone for participating. For Ibu Rektor and Vice Rektor who have further agenda, I will call for you.
Thank you. Terima kasih ya.
Okay, without further ado, let us begin to our core agenda for this seminar. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now entering the main section of today's international seminar. It is my honor to invite our respected moderator, to Ms. Nadia Latifa SLLM, who will guide and facilitate this session. Please welcome Ms. Nadia.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Well, thank you so much for our lovely Master of Ceremony today for giving me a chance. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, are happy. Notice that we are apart from a different region now. So dear audiences, welcome to our international seminar on the theme Bridging Kriminologi and Viktimologi toward Inclusive Justice System. And today we have a very great speaker here. We invite Dr. Banu Prakashmana from forward. Give applause all. Good morning, Mr. Banu. Mr. Banu is come here so far from India, right? So Mr. Banu will talk about victimology and talking about inclusive justice system today. Discussion highlights an important shift in how we understand justice, not only through the lens of offenders and punishment, as traditionally emphasized in criminology, but also by recognizing the experiences, right, and recovery of victims as explored in victimology. This theme actually invite us to rethink about how the justice system can be. So here, Mr. Banu will explain to us how the criminology and victimology, the relation between, so we can toward inclusive justice system. So for Dr. Banu, time is yours.
Change slide. First slide. First.
The first slide.
Satu. Dan 1, 2, 3. Selamat pagi. Pagi. Am I audible? Can you all hear me? Yes. Can you understand me? Little bit. If I speak slowly, will you understand me? Yes. I will try to speak slowly because I only have 45 minutes to speak. So I'll try to cover the slides if you don't understand in between, stop it. Right? Dr. Nadia will help us in translating, or anyone will help us. Okay? Collaboration with UPGRIS is not new. Okay? I've been part of other events from UPGRIS in the past. Right? Indonesia is not new for me. Semarang is new, first time in Semarang, but in Indonesia this is my 8th visit. 8 times in Indonesia. Almost every year. Right? So I think I've been to many places more than some of you in Indonesia. Okay? I like the people, I like the food, I like the hospitality of Indonesian people. I like coming back to Indonesia whenever I have an opportunity. Okay. Thank you so much for that. And for today, thank you the rector, vice rectors, the dean of School of Law, the head of program, law study program, Nadia. Right. We've known for some time now and been working together on several projects. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here today and speak about an important concept. Right? You're all law students, law lecturers, right? This is the School of Law, this is the law faculty. It's important to talk about what justice is, how justice should be, right? How do you think justice should be? How do you think it should be? What should be the outcome of a justice process? Right? Who benefits in the current justice system, in Indonesian justice system? Who gets benefited? Do you think victims are benefited? Do you think offenders are benefited? Who benefits from the system? Right? Whose interests are being served in the current criminal justice system or criminal legal system? Whose interests are served? Okay? Everything is done in the name of serving justice to the victims. Right? Defense attorney, public prosecutor, a judge, police, everybody is trying to do something in the name of helping victim or serving justice to the victim. But my question is, are victims really being served justice in the justice system? Are they really getting their justice? Right? Are we giving them what they want? Okay? Now, there are two perspectives, two important perspectives when you look at what happens after crime. Right? Once a crime is committed, there are two ways of looking at it. One, from an offender perspective. Right? Why did this person commit crime? What motivated this person to commit crime? What is wrong with him? Right? The criminal, the offender. You can look at crime from the offender perspective. Okay? The second perspective is the victim's perspective. Okay? Offender, why he committed crime? What motivated him to commit crime? Why did this offender choose this victim? Right? Why did he choose this victim? Okay? Now there is victim perspective. So if these are criminals, these are offenders, and these are the victims, right? You have their perspective, and we have this perspective also, right? When I look at from you, I want to understand why you did this crime, right? Why you committed crime? What is your motivation? What did you want to get out? Why did you choose this victim? Right? So from your perspective, here I have victim's perspective, and this is why did I harm? Why was I harmed? Right? What happened to me after the victimization? Right? What happened to my psychology? What happened to my physical and the state. Right? Everybody has their interests. There is offender's interest, there is victim's interest, and there is state's interest. State also has some interest in the crime and the criminal activity, in the law and the legal outcome. State has its own interest. If you look at the criminal language, the legal language, it's called state versus offender. Right? State versus offender. It's not victim versus offender in criminal cases. Right? State takes the control over the crime and then reduces victim just for the witness. Right? Only as a witness in the court proceedings. So the role of victim, although they are the ones who are affected by the crime, victims are the ones who are harmed. They are affected by the crime. Right? What happens in the criminal legal system is that victims are just reduced as witnesses. Right? So their victimization is minimized in the criminal legal system. Okay? So what victimology does is to give voice back to the victim, make them heard, right? Allow them to participate in the criminal legal system. Okay? Allowing them to participate again, say what they want, right? Ask apology from the offender. There are several ways in which victims could be included in the mainstream criminal legal system. Okay? Which is what victimology will look at. Victimology talks about what is the harm done, what are the damages of the victim, how can we support the victim, right? How can we help them recover from this victimization? Okay, so that is victimology. So what we are doing today is to bridge the criminology, this perspectives, with these perspectives, and try to make it much more inclusive. Okay? Why inclusive? Because victims are being excluded in the system. They are not made part. Right? The state and offender plays a big role than the victim. So what we are trying to do is to integrate this criminology and victimology, perspectives from criminology and victimology, and make our justice system much more inclusive, much more helpful, much more humane for both offender, victim, and everybody who is impacted by this. Right? So this is the context. Okay? Next slide. So this is what I've been talking about. There is the state, right? The state and the offender are at the center. Okay? They play a very important role. If you look at the victim is pushed towards the periphery. Right? Their interest does not matter. They are not at the center. They are the peripheries. Okay? So our idea is to bring the victim back in the center with the state and with the offender. Okay? So we want to keep the victim back in the center. Next slide. Yeah. So if you look at the differences between criminology and victimology, the focus of criminology and victimology for decades, for several decades now, 1900s, 1800s, right? If you look at their focus, okay, criminology always had crime and offender in the center, right? It's about the crime, it's about offense, it's about offender. So the roots of criminology is much more classical. We are talking about what law has been violated, what code needs to be applied, right? When you are filing the complaint, what sentences should be given for the crime that happened, right? It's more classical, more nominal, more positivist, right? There is no flexibility. Law is not flexible. Law is rigid, right? You have legal codes. This crime, this punishment. You apply this law. It's rigid. You don't allow flexibility in the law, right? It's codified, it's rigid, it's normative, okay? And the core focus of criminology is to understand the causes, understand the crime patterns of offending, and divine behaviors of this criminal. You are fearful of committing a rape. Okay, so that is called deterrence, right? Inducing fear in the common society so that it becomes a lawful society, right? So that is deterrence, that is the ultimate goal of criminology. Control and rehabilitation of the offender is also part of criminology. That is a focus. Now the view of victim in criminology, if you look at it, it is just incidental. Okay? It is just in that movement, and victims are seen as byproducts of the crime, as a consequence of crime. Right? Historically, framed through problematic theories like victim precipitation, which suggest partial blaming on the victim. You understand victim blame? Blaming victims for their own victimization, right? So victim blaming is also part of criminological understanding of why crime has happened, right? You have several theories like lifestyle, routine activity theory in criminology, which will tell you why crime happened. So in that process, you're also trying to look at what did victim do which motivated the offender to commit the crime, right? The role of victim, which is called victim precipitation. It is victim blaming in essence, right? So the criminological focus has been about the victim to identify their contributions in committing the crime. So which is criticized. Okay? Now you have victimology, and the roots of victimology, it emerged as a disappointment with the existing system. How did victimology become a discipline? What is the origin? Because people are not happy with the justice system. People are not happy that victims are not heard, right? And several philosophers, theorists, who were criminologists, deviated from criminology and started to develop a separate discipline called victimology. Because they were unhappy with the way victims are being treated in the justice system, right? And the core focus of victimology would be the lived experiences of the victim, right? What happened to the victim, the narrative, the pain, the trauma, the suffering, the damages, right? Recovery. How is this person recovering from all these damages, right? How are they finding a new job? How are they relocating to a different city? What can we do to make their lives a little more easy? So that is the focus of victimology. You talked about the trauma they have been part of, the psychological disturbances that happens to them, disturbed sleep, loneliness, isolation, right? Trauma, depression. These are all psychological impacts of a crime on a victim. Victimology focuses on that. Victimology tries to understand the victim's psychology, the impact of victimization on the victim, right? And how can you repair this? How can you help victim recover from this? Okay? So that is the focus of victimology. So the ultimate goal of victimology is recognition, support, recovery, and redressal for victims. Okay, that is the ultimate goal. And the view of the system from victimology is that it is critical of power dynamics. Right? Judge is so powerful. Political leaders are so powerful. Right? Defense authorities are so powerful. So there are these power differences in the system. And victimology is very critical about that. Right? It also admits that these structural inequalities could create victimizations in the society. Right? That is structural victimology. If you look at the victimology which focuses on how these inherent structures and power dynamics could result in further victimization of citizens. Right? That is critical victimology. So the focus is on the structural inequalities which shape the victimization. So these are the focuses of criminology and victimology. What we are trying to do is to integrate all of that and make it one whole sum, where offender is attended, victim is also attended, right? Offender's interest also matter, victim's interest also matter. You're not ignoring anyone in this system, which is why we call it inclusive justice system. You're including offender, you're including victim, you're also keeping state's interest in the context. Right? Next slide. Okay? So there is definitely some institutional inertia that we all experience, which comes from the procedural complexities, right? How many of you are lawyers, you understand what happens in the court, you understand what happens in the police station, because you're studying, you're learning about the law. Whatever a common individual, a common citizen, layman, who did not study law, right? How difficult is a court, or how difficult a police station is for a common man. They can't understand what happens in the police station. They don't understand what their rights are, right? They don't understand how to talk in the court, how to represent themselves, right? When to speak, when in front of a judge. They don't know any of it, right? No, it is a very, very complex process. And there are procedures which make it much more complicated for people involved to comprehend it. Same with offender also. Offender also do not understand the system, right? So we have a complex system with procedural hindrances which make it much more complicated for both offender and the victim. Right? How do we simplify this? How do we make law accessible? How do we make these institutions accessible to its citizens? Right? So the legal framing, the marginalization and the distress that victims and sometimes offenders also experience, the institutional culture, right? How a judge behaves in court, for example, right? Judge bureaucratically, relentlessly prioritizing operational efficiency than being emotionally empathetic to the victim, right? There are so many pending cases. A judge has to attend to so many matters in the court on every day. There is very little time for a judge to be emotional about what happened to the victim, right? So they're very quick, they're very insensitive sometimes, right? Because they have to finish work. So all this will create a space where victim does not feel safe. Victims feel unsafe in the court because of these procedural challenges, because of the judges, they want to be efficient with their work, they want to finish their cases soon, right? You see a lot of emotional detachment, emotional insensitivity in the court spaces, okay? And the resource deficits, yes, you don't have so many judges, so many public prosecutors, right? You don't have special courts, friendly courts, victim support centers, right? There is so much that our society still lacks in terms of infrastructure to make victims or offenders' life much easier. Okay? We are struggling with institutional resource constraints. Next slide. Okay? So we will look at three important dimensions from the victim's perspective, right? Which matter to us most. First one is the hidden harm. What are the kinds of damages that the victims go through after victimization? What kind of damages? There are physical damages, physical injuries to the body for victims. Yeah. If it is a physical assault, there are physical damages to the body of the victim. There are psychological damages. There is trauma, right? You are following? There is psychological damage. There is financial damages also, right? Victim might not be able to go to job for work. They will not get salary, or they will lose job, right? Or they will have to spend money for medical treatment. Okay? So there are physical damages, financial damages, and emotional damages. Now when you are talking about emotional damage, so it is a hidden harm, right? You can't see emotional damage, right? So it's hurt. The victim is hurt, but you can't see the damage. The physical damages are visible, but the emotional, psychological damages, you can't see them, right? So it's called hidden harm. And sometimes in severe cases of victimization, in severe crimes, there is also a possibility of post-traumatic stress disorder, right? PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, as a result of serious crime that the victim has gone through, okay? And there are chances of clinical depression for victims. There are chances of severe anxiety, right? Severe anxiety and complex grief, okay? Complicated grief experience of the victim following the victimization, okay? Next slide. Yeah. You know what secondary victimization is? How is it different from primary victimization? Primary victimization is the crime. Primary victimization is rape, murder, right? Assault. Okay, that is primary victimization. Secondary victimization is the negative attitude, right? If you look at it, okay. Second, institutional contact. Victim interacts with police, courts, or medical systems, and their experiences could include dismissing attitudes, victim blaming, uncooperative behavior, criticism, interrogation of victim, right? Disbelief towards the victim. All these are common responses towards victim following the victimization. Now this negative, unhelpful attitudes, behaviors that everybody show to the victim, right? It's not just the police or the lawyer or the judge, right, who is negative to the victim. It can be your father, it can be your mother, it can be your friend, society, neighbors, relatives, right? We all have possibility of damaging the victim more, harming the victim more, right? And now this is called secondary victimization. Primary victimization, first victimization is a crime. Secondary victimization is the negative attitudes, unhelpful behaviors, victim blaming, right? That is secondary victimization. Okay? So the goal of victimology is to reduce, prevent secondary victimization. Right? So you have to build systems which are much more sensitive, much understanding towards the victims. Okay? Then you will be able to handle secondary victimization. Otherwise, we are going to re-traumatize the victims in the process of helping them. Now, the disadvantage of secondary victimization is that victims might refuse to seek help. If they fear that they are going to be blamed for victimization, they will not speak. They will not file a complaint. Right? We still have so many women who are victims of sexual violence do not report the matter to police. Police complaints are not filed in many cases. Right? So you call that as dark figure. Unreported crimes. You call it dark figure. So the dark figure numbers are very heavy. Why does it happen? Because the victims do not trust the system. They fear that police are going to blame them. They fear that police are not going to take the complaint seriously. All of that amounts to secondary victimization. They also have a strong belief that it will take years before they could get any justice. Right? The long duration of pendingness with the cases. All of that causes more trauma, more hurt to the victims. And it will prevent them from seeking help. Right? They will not file a complaint. Okay? So that is the vicious cycle of secondary victimization. Next slide. The second dimension is from the criminological perspective. If you look at the dynamics and risk that is involved, right? If you look at crime rates, crime statistics, most of the crimes that happen are committed by somebody who is known to the victim. Most of the sexual offences, if you look at it, there is familiarity factor. Victims know the offenders. In only a small proportion of these cases, it is a stranger who is an offender. Otherwise, in most of the cases, the offender is a well-known person to the victim. Right? Sometimes it is a family member, sometimes they are friends, right? Sometimes it is their acquaintances. But victim knows the offender in most of the cases. Right? So there is this relationship between an offender and the victim, which matters to the criminological point of view. Right? Let's say, for example, if father is the one who has abused the child, right? Now the chances of that being reported becomes very less because mother does not want to report, brother does not want to report. There is pressure on this child to not report this, not tell this to everybody, maintain this as a secret, because it is within the family, right? So the relation between the victim and understand further, right? So this victim-offender relationship also becomes very, very crucial, as it can complicate the entire reporting mechanism, right? The relationship. Okay. Structural factors we talked about. There is socio-economic inequalities, right? We are social structures, right? In society, we have our differences, right? If you look at Indian system, there is higher caste, there is lower caste, there are social structures. There is poor, there is rich, there is educated, uneducated, employed, unemployed. There are a lot of social structures. If you look at gender, right? There is man, there is woman. Now there are different other genders also, right? Transgenders, minorities, sexual minorities, different orientations, different preferences. There is a lot of differences amongst people. And now these differences could create structures, social structures, with unequal distribution of power. Right? So men are considered generally powerful than women in the society. That is patriarchy. Right? Men are considered powerful. Who gave them that power? Why are women less powerful than women? What happens to this power difference? What is the impact of this power difference between men and women? Right? The mainstream argument is this power difference is why we have domestic abuse in home, where husband slaps women in the house, beats her every day. Why is this? Because of the power difference that is there between a man and a woman, which is a social structure. Gender inequalities, right? Social inequalities, religious inequalities, right? Indonesia is a Muslim-dominated country. It is a secular country, secular Muslim country, right? But there are countries where, like for example Bangladesh, you see that Hindus are being targeted in Bangladesh in the last 6 months, right? Because Muslim is a majority and Hindus are minority. So majority has power and they cause abuse to the minority. They harm the minority. So that is the power of the structural differences, right? They can create victimizations, right? Let's say there is an urban neighborhood and there is a slum. Okay? Urban and a slum. There is a posh apartment, right? A big apartment where so many rich people live. Okay? Rich community. And then you also have a slum nearby, a poor community. Right? You see that there are a lot of thefts happening in that community, a lot of robberies, right? A lot of burglaries happening in that community because there is rich and poor difference in money, right? And the poor people are going to target the homes of rich people. Okay? So theft can happen when there is power differences of economy. Okay? So crime emerges from these structural inequalities that we have, power differences that we have. Okay? Next slide. Right? Now when you look at, let's pay attention. I know it's difficult, but try to follow. Okay? I understand there are language differences, but please try to follow. Right? So we have law, the perspective of law. What is the role of law in terms of victimology or inclusive justice system? Is that access to justice, it requires more than formal rights. So most of the jurisdictions, like Indonesia also have victims' rights, India has victims' rights, the problem, Europe has victims' rights, Canada has victims' rights. The problem with victims' rights is its implementation. You have rights on paper, but when it comes to making that into a reality, you have challenges. The implementation is always a problem when it comes to victims' rights. Right? There are 4 different kinds of victims' rights which are very important. Right to protection. Your rector also mentioned in her welcoming speech, the right to protection is not just about punishing the offender. Right? Sentencing the offender should not be the only goal. You also need to think about how do you protect the victim? How do you allow the victim to participate in the criminal legal process? How do you support the victim with victim assistance? Right? How do you aid in their recovery? So the victims have right to protection, right to compensation, and right to participate in the criminal legal proceedings. They have these rights. And how do you make that rights into reality? Right? Translating rights into reality is definitely a big challenge. Okay, next slide. So this is what we are talking about when it comes to inclusive justice, where you are trying to bridge both criminology and victimology. Okay, the first pillar, if you look at, there are 5 important pillars, right? The first one is restorative practices. The second pillar is specialized codes. Third pillar is compensation schemes. The fourth is community mechanisms. The fifth is tech-enabled support. Right? These are 5 important pillars which can help to reimagine our justice systems and make it much more inclusive. Now we'll try to look at each one of them. Next slide. The first pillar is about restorative justice. You know what restorative justice is? What is our take? Do you have restorative justice in Indonesia? Yes. There is good amount of restorative justice and there is legal recognition as well. Right? It is asked for the law that you conduct restorative justice, but in cases that are not very severe. If it is a serious case, like for example, if it is a murder or a rape or a sexual assault, restorative justice cannot be done in Indonesia. It is against the law. Right? Only in minor cases like theft, right? Vandalism, property damage, right? Small, petty, minor crimes, you can conduct restorative justice. Okay? And there is also living law, traditional law, which is also recognized by the mainstream legal system, right? Which promotes restorative practices, community justice systems, community models, right? The local traditions, local laws. Okay? Now what happens in restorative justice? There is offender, there is victim, and there are mediators. Right? The mediators will try to help the offender and the victim to reconcile and solve their problems. That is restorative justice, where you have an offender and a victim sitting together with the help of a facilitator and resolving their conflicts. Right? In typical RJ, typical restorative process, what happens is the offender and the victim, they meet in one room and facilitator is talking to them. Right? What happens in that conversation is victim gets to share about their experiences. Right? Victims will tell the offender what happened to them following the crime. After crime, how did their life change? What happened to their life? What damage this person's behavior has caused to this victim. Victim is directly telling the offender, look, because of you, I lost my job. Because of you, I lost custody of the child. Because of you, my husband divorced me. Right? So victim is narrating the impact of the crime on them and making the offender feel accountable for it. Victim is telling, this is your fault. You did this to me. Right? In restorative process, there is this possibility. Now, offender has a chance to take accountability for their actions. Right? Offender says, yes, it's my fault. I should not have done that. I was intoxicated. I was a drug addict. I needed money. I lost my job. Offender is telling why he or she has committed this crime to the victim. And they are telling victim why did they choose them. Right? Why was it them they chose? Right? So offender and victim are having a conversation about the crime and the impact of it. In the end, victim can get an apology from the offender. Offender will apologize. Right? Offender will agree to pay for the damages, provide money to the victim so that the victim should recover. Right? So all of this is possible in restorative justice. Okay? Here there is criminology view, there is victimology view. Offenders' views are also kept at the center, offenders' interests are kept at the center, and you also have victims' interests kept at the center. Okay? So this is inclusive justice, where you have criminology, victimology, both trying to bridge the gap. Right? Restorative justice can do that. The second one, next slide. Okay? Special courts. there are domestic violence courts, specialized courts to hear these matters, right? So these specialized courts are understood as places where there is much more sensitization with the people who are involved in these processes, right? A judge who is much more sensitive about trauma that a rape victim goes through, a lawyer, a defense lawyer, right? They understand the psychology, they understand the trauma, right? That is why there are special courts, there are fast track courts. You cannot delay the judgment in these cases. Within 6 months, within a year, you have to decide on the sentencing, right? These are special fast track courts, okay? And then you also have different models of court complexes now being considered by different countries. Like for example, there could be waiting rooms in the court where a victim could be seated, does not feel comfortable, right? They can not confront the offender. Victims might be scared facing the offender, right? There could be special waiting rooms for the victim. There could be child play areas. Sometimes victims have to bring their children, right? But the courts are very, very difficult places. Courts could induce trauma in children, right? So if there are play areas, play rooms where child could play and spend time, right? So this is victim-centric. Okay, you are thinking about how you can make the life of the victim much better. So creating spaces that are trauma-informed, right? Embedding support in these places. Okay. In some countries, you have victim support people working from the court. So courts have counseling rooms, psychological counseling rooms available, right? Courts have social workers available. Courts have medical rooms, right? All of these are victim-centric practices. You are embedding victim support in the existing justice systems, right? Which is what we are talking about when it comes to inclusive justice. Next one. Okay. Other important aspect is compensation. Does Indonesia have compensation in their legal system? Do you have victim compensation? You sure? Do you have victim compensation in Indonesian legal system? You don't have victim compensation. The monetary benefit that the victim gets is paid by the offender. The offender pays compensation to the victim. The government do not pay compensation to the crime victims in Indonesia. You don't have a comprehensive compensation scheme for the victims in Indonesia, right? In the sentencing, the judge orders the offender to pay restitution to the offender, to the victim. The state does not pay the money, right? In several countries, we have victim compensation, okay? So it's important to have victim compensation provided to victims. Why should state pay compensation to the victims? Why do you think states should pay? State should pay. Anybody who wants to answer? Why do you think government should compensate victims? Why? You can answer in Bhasha also. Okay? Why is it government's responsibility to pay compensation to the victims? No answer? It is the citizen of the state and it is state, the government has to take care of its citizens. That is why they should compensate. failed in protecting the victim. Okay? Because the crime could not be prevented. Right? Crime happened. And the government could not stop. Police could not stop. Right? So which means the government has failed in its duty to protect its citizens. Right? So the state is accountable. State is liable. State is responsible for causing that crime by not preventing it. Right? Crime prevention is a duty of the state. When a crime happens, that duty is not done properly. So that is why it is the state's responsibility to compensate the victim, because they failed in its duty to protect the victim. Okay? So state has a duty. Now compensation is an important support, victim support. I'm not saying it is the only support that needs to be given to victims. There are other kinds of support, like medical, psychological support, legal support, right? There could be support also in terms of child care, elder care. There are so many ways in which victims could be supported. Vocational training, helping them find a job, right? Relocate, give them different identities, right? There are so many ways in which you can protect the victims. Okay? But victim compensation is also an important component of victim support. Okay? Next slide. Right?
So let's say 5 minutes.
Right? Other important aspects, community efforts, okay, and how you can use technology in terms of providing victim support. Right? Community, like for example, I was in Canada for 4 months before I came to India. Right? In Canada, there is problem with housing. Victims do not get shelter, right? Because the demand is more than the supply. More people wanted shelter, but there is only less spaces available, right? So Canada has problem with shelter. So what the Canadian government is thinking of doing is to allow incentives to the house owners. Incentivizing house owners if they allow the victim to stay in their place. Right? Government is telling house owners, I will pay you an incentive if you let this victim stay in your place, right, for a short period, for 1 month, 2 months. If you allow the victim to stay in your place, government is going to give them tax rebates, government is going to provide incentives, right, to these house owners. Okay? How is this possible? Because the community is very, very strong. Community is resourceful. Governments may have budget limitations, financial limitations. The community is rich, right? Community support is very rich. So it's important to also engage community in bringing out solutions to these social problems, right? So community could be integrated in terms of providing healthy, better, holistic victim support. It's possible to engage communities. The other important aspect that we all should be focusing is on technology. How you can use technology to provide victim support. Right? How can tech be enabled to provide victim support? Like for example, now you can have portal, an online portal for filing a complaint. You don't have to go to police station. You can sit and file your complaint to a concerned police station from your home. The investigating officer can come, visit you at your home and collect the evidence. You don't have to go to police station at all. You can bring these changes by using technology, right? You can also build apps which can put all the victim support services on the app, right? Like how you can search a restaurant using your Google, right? If you search for a restaurant, or you can say restaurants near me, right? In Google, it will give you different options, right? In the maps, it will give you different options. It will tell you this is the closest. This is 3 kilometers away. This is 10 kilometers away. Right? This has good review, 5-star rating, 4-star rating. Right? You can get this for other services. Right? Hotels, restaurants, you can get these services. You can also get this for victim support. Right? An app will help you identify a closest police station. Right? An app would help you understand a closest NGO or a lawyer's office, right? Or a court or a hospital or a counseling center. It can help you locate the closest support that you can access to in case of emergency. It can list all important emergency contact details for you, right? So you can have victim support apps which can help bring more accessibility to the victim and the services, right? So technology could be used in terms of making our victim support much effective, right? From complaining to asking for help, filing applications for compensation, right? In Canada, for example, you don't have to go to court to get victim compensation, right? You can sit from your home and claim for compensation by submitting evidences, right? So it is done through online applications, okay? So tech could be a very, very useful and effective thing in terms of building more effective support systems for victims, right? So these are the 5 different ways in which we can think about how you can integrate criminology and victimology to make our justice systems more inclusive. Can you go to the last slide? Last. Okay? Right? So what we are talking here is justice system which will balance accountability with compassion. Right? Compassion should be the center of human justice applications. Right? The judges must be sensitive, they must be compassionate towards both offender and the victim. They are not just talking about the victim. It could be for the offender and the victim. So bridging criminology and victimology, it redefines the purpose of the legal system. Right? Redefines the purpose. What is the purpose of the legal system? Right? It allows us to recognize the full spectrum of harm done and prioritize the needs of those who are impacted. Okay? Inclusive justice system, it listens, it adapts and responds to the complexities of human experience. We also prove that justice can be rightly effective, deeply humane and equitable. Okay? Justice could be highly effective, deeply humane and equitable. Equitable justice, right? Humane justice. Okay? It's not just law codified, legally justice system, but humane, emotionally involved justice process. Compassionate justice systems. Right? That is what inclusive justice system could do. Okay? And thank you so much for listening to me. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer that. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to Dr. Internasional. Such a very comprehensive explanation today, right? So, dear audiences, ladies and gentlemen, are happy. Now we will start our discussion, right? So, if you wanna ask question, please. Okay, nice, Stephanie, please, for the official. Okay, stand up and introduce your name and convey your question, please.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. Let me introduce myself. My name is Stephanie and I would like to ask about marginalizations of victims. As we know, victims often feel marginalized during the criminal justice process. So, to what extent can inclusive justice address systemic inequalities faced by marginalized victims? Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, you want to directly answer, please?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Before that, it's important to understand why victims get marginalized. Why are they marginalized? Right? What is it in the social structure which marginalizes a victim? Now, people are marginalized. Forget about crime. Right? Crime does marginalize people. That is there. Crime does marginalize victims. But even before the commission of the crime, right? People are marginalized. There are minority communities, right? Like women and man. The power difference between a man and a woman. The power difference between a rich and a poor. Right? The power difference between a political leader and and a common citizen. There are these structural inequalities, right, which bring in the power differences, creating discrimination from powerful to the powerless. Right? So social structures also marginalize. Now, if we have to make the justice system much more inclusive, it's important to listen to these, pay attention to these marginalized people. That is what we are talking when, if you understand in the justice system, who is very powerful? It is the state which is powerful. The government, the state is powerful, and the state is keeping offenders' interest. State wants to, right, listen to offender. That is why it is called criminal justice system. It is not victim justice system. Why is it criminal justice system, not victim justice system? The entire play, entire drama in the court is done in the name of serving justice to the victim, right? If you ask a judge, what are you doing? The judge will say, I want to give justice to the victim. Right? The prosecutor says, I want to bring justice to the victim. Right? But why is it called criminal justice system and not victim justice system? Systems have already marginalized the victim. Right? The victim is already in the periphery, not in the center. Okay? So that is why we want to bring victim back to the center. We want to listen to the victim. We want to give victim a voice. We want to ask victim what happened to them. How can we help? What can make it better for you? Right? Make them participate. Right? We have victim impact statements. Okay, even in Indonesian legal system, we have victim impact statements, which means the victim stands in the court, right, and tells to the judge what happened to them. Okay, and also explains how the crime has affected them. Right? How much they have suffered. So this is victim impact statement. The sad reality of victim impact statements is the judges are asked not to take it seriously when they are giving sentencing orders. Right? When the judge is writing the sentence, right, they are asked to ignore the victim impact statement. In Indian legal system, you have victim impact statements allowed, but the judges are told not to take it seriously. Because it is understood that if you listen to the victim, you might be emotionally biased. The judge will become emotionally biased by the victim's narrative. And the system wants the judge to be objective in sentencing. It is actually keeping the offender's interest. So you don't want the offender to be heavily penalized, right? Because of them listening to the victim. If the victim cries in the courtroom and becomes emotional, now the judge is going to be affected and he might give higher sentencing to the offender. So this is how it is understood. But it is being unfair to the victim. Right? How do you give a chance to the victim who is the affected party? Right? So how you can guarantee victim inclusiveness is being much more sensitive, much more empathetic, much more understanding. Nobody is telling you to forget your duties. Nobody is telling you to become biased, right? But give a chance to the victim to speak about it. Right? You do what is required. Ask them. Don't assume that this is what they want, right? Who said sentencing, punishing an offender is the goal of a victim? Victims have different expectations, right? With the court. But who told you that the victims want to seek revenge? How did you decide that victims only want revenge? Only want to see their offender to be sentenced to prison? How did you decide this without asking the victim? Do we have a process where we check what is justice for the victim by asking them directly? We don't do that. We assume that all victims, no matter what, they want their offenders to be sentenced. This is what the presumption is. And our justice system is built on this presumption that victims want revenge. Victims don't want revenge. Victims want their life to be normal again. Victims want the abuse to stop. Victims want their lives to be repaid. They want to get a job. They want to have the custody of the child. They want to live a normal life. They want to forget trauma, move on. Right? This is what victims want. But we are serving victims thinking that they want the offender to be punished. Right? That is not the victim's interest, that is the state's interest. So it's important to feel, understand whose interests are we serving. As long as you are serving victims' interest, we have a healthy system. So our goal is to bring the victims' interests and serve those victims' interests in the system's process. Right?
Okay, nice. Thank you so much for the very comprehensive answer. That we realize that victimology is a very crucial. Then, who next wanna ask question? Okay, please introduce yourself and convey your question. Stand up, please.
Good morning, Mr. Dr. Veronica Luna. Let me introduce myself. My name is Anita Muiz. I would like to ask a question regarding the topic. So my question is, what are the main challenges in integrating victimology into existing criminal justice system? And how can legal system in developing countries better implement this integration? Thank you.
Okay, go ahead and answer, please.
So the 5 important pillars that I mentioned in my lecture, 5 pillars, starting with restorative justice, special courts, community integration, right? Technology, compensation. So all these things are important to make it much more inclusive. Okay? So if you're talking about restorative, it has both criminology elements, it also has victimology elements. If you talk about compensation, where you are lifting the burden from the offender, you are not making only the offender accountable, right, to pay the fine. What if in most of the cases, you have offenders who are poor, right? If you sentence the offender to pay for the restitution, and the offender does not have money to pay to the victim, now what happens? Nothing, right? Government is not paying, right? Offender cannot pay. Now victim financial needs are just left, nobody is attending to that, right? By introducing victim compensation and forcing the governments to pay to the victims, because it is their duty to repay, right? By forcing the government to pay to the victim, is also lifting burden on the offender, right? In cases where offenders cannot pay, right? So you keep both offender, state, and the victim's interest as much as possible, right? In this, sometimes somebody has to sacrifice a little bit, like state, for example, they have to pay for compensation, but it's also important for them to admit their accountability, right? By failing their duty to protect the victim from occurrence of the crime, right? So the state has failed its duty. So now let them make accountable for it. Like for example, if there is a cyber crime, right? You are using Facebook or Instagram, and somebody violates you on Instagram and Facebook, posts a very bad message about you on an Instagram, right? Now whose fault is that? Who do you blame for that? Who do you blame when there is cyber bullying, when there is cyber sexual harassment, right? When there is child pornography being distributed, right? Non-consensual image sharing on media platforms. Who do you blame for all these violations? You want to blame the user? You want to blame the user who is using this Instagram, like you as a victim? Do you want to blame the victim? Do you want to blame the perpetrator who has caused this distress? Do you want to blame the government which could not bring about regulations, safety regulations? Or do you want to blame the Facebook, Instagram, these digital platform media owners for not building a safe and secure platforms for us to use? Right? There are several people whom you can blame it, make them feel accountable. You can teach the user to be responsible, be careful, use precautions, right? Enable safety features while they are using it, right? You can also create messages, alert mechanisms in the platform. Let's say when I'm let's say I'm using an abusive word, right? A curse word on Instagram, right? So I should get a pop-up message saying, warning me, don't post it, this is abusive content. You will be reported if you use such language on Instagram or on Facebook. I should get this pop-up message so that I'm alerted. I don't commit a crime in cyberspace. And it can be done, right? The platforms could be made much more safer, right? One abusive post, the profile should be deleted, banned, blocked, right? And complaint should automatically be registered, right? So you can make people accountable, okay? Accountability is the key. Once you acknowledge that this is my fault, then you will also know that this is also my duty to repair it. It is also my duty to bring comfort to the persons that are harmed. Right? That accountability at the offender level or the state level becomes very, very crucial. Okay?
Okay, thank you so much for the very comprehensive answer. Maybe the last question. The last question. Okay, for the MC. Okay, please.
Should I introduce myself? Okay, my name is Alice. I just want to ask a question. Like, I am so curious about if it's in India, how to solve the problem in case like there's a rape case, and then how to solve that problem? Is that more in criminology or victimology side? Thank you.
In the case of rape in Indian context, I would say at this point, we do carry both criminological perspective and victimological perspective in attending to that case. Criminological meaning, you have special courts, right? Specialized courts that I mentioned. They have special fast-track courts for rape and sexual assaults, right? Which means the case will go to a special court. It will not go to a regular court, right? In special courts, you have judges who are sensitive, a little more sensitive about the trauma, about the rape impact on the victim. They understand, right? So it is a special court, and special courts also has a mandate to conduct a speedy trial, right? So the sentencing should happen quickly. It cannot take several long years, right? So these are special fast-track courts to attend to cases of rape and sexual assault. That is in the interest of both offender and the victim. And two, you also have victim support centers. So here also you have victim support centers, right? Where different kinds of services are provided to victims under one roof, right? So you go to the center, you get medical support, legal support, financial support in terms of victim compensation application to be filed, right? You will also get police support, emergency rescue services, right? Different kinds of services are provided under one roof. It's called one-stop crisis center. So victim support is also arranged, provided for victims. So the treatment of a rape, sexual assault victim, if you look at from a framework's point of view, the system's point of view, you have systems available, like your special courts, you have victim support centers. We call it Saki One-Stop Center. It's a program, right? And these are centers available to assist victims. So there are systems available to support. The challenge in terms of cases of rape and sexual violence of different nature is the attitude of people, right? How society treats them, how society arranges support for them. You have systems, but you don't have people who are very, very sensitive, very, very understanding of it. There is still victim blaming, there is secondary victimization which is happening, right? There is under-reporting, fear of police, fear of courts. There are so many other social problems around rape and sexual assault, stigma, right? So these are all bigger challenges. So you build systems, you have facilities, but if you don't have people, right? People who are sensitive, right? Who does not have a culture of helping, who does not have a culture of listening, right? Then the systems will fail. So the problem is with the community, is with the society, is with the individual family members. And these are your parents, these are your brothers, these are your sisters who are blaming you for being a victim, right? So most often you are criticized for wearing small clothes, right? For being a victim of rape, or going with a friend of yours in the middle of the night, right? You are blamed for it. That culture of blaming a victim has to change, right? I think which is where the real problem is. Building systems, infrastructure, facilities, right, might not be a real solution, or a complete solution. The culture of responding to rape victims must change. Right? The societies must be much more compassionate, less victim blaming, feeling more accountable, taking responsibility, right? Volunteering, right? Asking and providing help, right? These are some of the things that we can certainly focus on.
Well, thank you so much for the very clearly and comprehensive answer, Dr. Banu. So, dear audiences, we have to gratitude because Dr. Banu is actually the head of Viktimological Center in RV University. So, he is a very expert in this field. And it make us realize and give us a very fruitful insight regarding victim blaming culture in our country, for example. So, dear audiences, as we know, the traditional criminal justice system have long been centered on the study of offender. As I emphasize in criminology, with a primary focus on law enforcement and punishment. However, this approach often overlooks the needs, experiences, and recovery of victims, which are central concerns on victimology. Therefore, bridging criminology and victimology becomes essential in creating a more balanced human and justice system. So, like Dr. Banu stated, bridging criminology and victimology redefine the purpose of the legal system. It allows us to recognize the full spectrum of harm and prioritize the needs of those impacted. Inclusive justice system listen, adapt, and respond to the complexities of human experience. They prove that justice can be highly effective, deeply human, and equitable. So here, the last of our session of International Seminar. Thank you so much for coming, Dr. Banu, and perhaps we can meet in other agenda for the next International Seminar. So I give to the Master of Ceremony. Thank you very much for your nice attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our program for this morning. I certainly thank to all guests for your presence and participation, and I also apologize for mistakes that I made. Once again, thank you and have a wonderful day ahead. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much.
Everyone can stand up and take a picture together again for a while for the last